and thank you for joining CivilNet. My guest today doesn't need much of an introduction, but the founding director of Civilitas Foundation, and also since 2014, the director of the Armenian Studies Institute at the University of Southern California. Salpi, welcome back to CivilNet.
Thank you.
First things first. The global Armenians thing that got Armenians globally speaking about it, of which you're the only Armenian with female signatory. Just want to discuss this global Armenians concept, because I think it's not such a new concept. It's relatively new. With the Armenians 2115 project, I think the concept was the same. Innovate Armenia probably had the same concept. So that's something new that hit us now, but has been in discussion for a while now, at least for the past year. What was this understanding of global Armenians, and each time you're involved? So
yeah, I guess I believe that. So let's put this in context. So Global Armenians was an ad that was placed in the New York Times and in Armenia in Hayastani Hanrabedutun on the occasion of the Armenian General Benevolent Unions, the AGBU's 110th anniversary. So a group of people, the idea was the Idea Foundation's idea, signed a statement that basically said, this is the time for global Armenians to get their heads and their resources and their hearts together to work together to meet the challenges of the global Armenian, that it's no longer sensible to talk about the diasporan, the American Armenian, the Hayastanci, which is a word I don't like, I don't know why, and all the rest of it, because the person who leaves Armenia comes back in 5 years. The diasporan Rubina has moved back to Armenia.
Twice.
There you go. There is these categories don't make sense anymore in this day of communications and technology. So let's just accept that we are, and as you said, we've always been global Armenians. The British East India Trade Company, Armenians in China, Armenians in Macau. In Macau, there are more Armenian headstones than Portuguese. We have always been the global Armenian. Let's embrace it. Let's stop beating ourselves over the head because we emigrate and we don't repatriate in sufficient numbers. Let's embrace it and say together we share a vision. That is, we want to be proud of being Armenian.
We are by default, aren't we?
Armenian or proud?
Proud.
No, I think that often we just kind of take it for granted, which itself is okay. We just are. I mean, you're something, we're Armenian. But if we're going to be proud of being Armenian, let's put that pride to work and put together our brains, our resources, and do something.
So it's not so much the problem, the way I see it, not like the agreement that we're going to be globally Armenian or global Armenian. It's just logistically, how do you do it? What's the technical part?
That's a very good question.
That is also something that wasn't explained in this announcement.
Right.
So it opened doors to a lot of questions.
It's a lot of questions, but also a lot of possibilities. It didn't say, here's our agenda, do you want to join? It said, if you believe in the idea, let's do this. And today, the possibilities are endless, not just because the world is smaller and high tech and communications and cheaper air travel and all of that stuff, but also because a career that used to be focused on one thing now can be something else. The tech guy can now solve the problem of how to become a global community on the web. The teacher can now begin to solve the problem of how to define Armenian identity. So it's so cross-disciplinary, multidisciplinary, that it's wide open. And if somebody says, look, I don't know what you guys are trying to do, but I'm ready to do the tech conceptual work to make this happen.
But here again, so everyone can become volunteers in this quest.
Or not volunteers.
Tools or a means to accomplishing an end. But when actually that program is set, how is it going to be globally coordinated? That's again, who are the decision makers? Because at this point, what we're a lot of the time used to is that there are decision makers who announce programs, and usually, traditionally, everyone says, all right, so this organization that's 110 years old and this other one that's 126 years old, they're going to take care of things, so we're going to help out. But now there's this middle ground, a lot of people who think critically, and that authoritative voice is not taken for for an absolute truth anymore.
Absolutely.
How is this coordination going?
So there are a few issues there. One of them is that all of these potential solvers, saviors that you referred to are institutions. And in post-independence Armenia, if we've proven anything, we've proven that not just institutions, but individuals around the world, in Armenia, outside of Armenia, are capable of bringing amazing change. Look at the change we brought around with CiviliNet. Look at the change Tumo has brought about. Individuals are able to bring change, number one.
Establish other institutions that will help.
Establish new post-genocide institutions. If you look around, whether it's Armenia or diaspora, especially diaspora, most of our institutions are genocide-era institutions. Post-independence institutions are something else. So A, we're not just looking to the traditional saviors. B, there is nothing wrong with asking questions. On the contrary, the great thing about what the Armenians 2115 did, the Gulbenkian Foundation program, is that it focused on asking questions. What we do at the Institute of Armenian Studies at USC is encourage researchers to ask questions. If you don't ask the right questions, you'll never get to the right answers. We're not there yet. We haven't asked the right questions. We all make a lot of assumptions about what our questions and challenges are, and perhaps we agree on many of them, perhaps we don't, but until we articulate the questions like migration, not emigration, but migration. What does that mean for the Armenian world? Migration means village to city. The whole world is experiencing that. French villages, the cutest, sweetest, prettiest, wine-filled, cheese-filled villages are in trouble.
Speaking of this, so AGBU, during the Soviet times, was one of the very few, if not the only, organization working in Soviet Armenia. So I was reading, and this was very interesting for me. They established Nubarashen for the repatriates, immigrants. And now they're doing the same, not establishing whole neighborhoods, but they're helping with the Syrian Armenians. So basically for the last 110 years, more or less, they've done the same thing. Same kind of the benefactor that they are, that taking care of social issues or at times of crisis coming and being the savior or at the helping hand. Is it, we have all this experience with this. Why? Maybe being political is more of an answer now, because if the 110th year is a milestone that should be taken and everything will change after this, yet the program is still the same. It's still we're going to help with the development. It's still we're going to be benefactors.
There's a couple of assumptions in your question. One of them is that the AGBU continues to do what it has always done. I won't speak and can't speak for the AGBU. I think the AGBU has a broad program. What your question really is, your other assumption is, when is the diaspora going to find new mechanisms to be more politically and civically active in Armenia? That's kind of what you're asking.
Yes.
And my answer is yesterday. And individual diasporans are, some organizations are. The political parties have repatriated and they're here. I don't know how effectively, but they're here. You know, the problem with the question is that the definition is off. Around the world, certainly the Western world, the word political isn't a good word anymore. So we all get all bent out of shape, bend over backwards to say, oh, we're not political. We're not political, and somehow there's pride in that. I think it's because we don't understand the concept of political correctly. And even in Armenian, there's a problem. The word քաղաքականություն means both political and policy. And we don't deal with policy enough. We talk about the political partisan party piece of political without talking about the policy piece of political. And without solid policy development, without solid policies within Armenia, this country, our country, will not grow and develop in ways that we all want. How do you do that? The amount of research and knowledge and best practices information that's required, that's where the diaspora has huge work to do. You don't have to carry a party's flag to be politically active in Armenia. You have to say, you know what, I know a thing or two about education and I can do this. I know a thing or two about poverty and I can do this. So political activism in Armenia does not need to be a revolution. It doesn't need to be backing this political party or that political party. It needs to be a commitment to bottom-up development, which means policy, which means vision, which means serious, tough work.
Not so swiftly, going on to my next question, but kind of related, I think. Well, the Armenian Studies Institute have been around for a while, and these are the people who are asking the question, doing the studies, and yet in this recent year, at least with the period that I can speak of, during the April War, in July, referendum, there wasn't much coming from the Armenian studies world, where we thought we were investing in the people who would do the studies and probably find answers, or at least a direction towards an answer. So what is the Armenian studies world? I think you're the only person I can ask this to.
I'm happy to try to answer. I think that part of our problem is that we still lack the mechanisms to share information about what those people in Armenian studies, the scholars, are doing. And there are increasingly young scholars and senior scholars working on contemporary issues. For decades, for obvious reasons, Armenian studies was either genocide studies in the face of denial, or it was the medieval manuscripts and where we fit in Western civilization. Both of those are lovely topics. However, more and more Armenian studies is a contemporary field. We recently, in the last couple of months, issued 2 calls at USC through the Institute with the help of very generous donors. There's no other way to do this. We issued a call saying that we would support research on Gharabagh because that conflict will only be resolved in a just and lasting way if the social, economic, political issues are understood, analyzed, documented. We received 60 requests for research support. A month later, we weren't able to fund all of them, obviously. We funded 14. A month later, we issued a different call under the title End of Transition, saying that it's been 25 years of this transition, and it's time we understand what that means. We received 71 requests for research support and another 90 requests to participate in a conference. The interest is there, the young scholars are there, and I think if we had more sophisticated media, more broad-based media, all of the conversation that takes place in social media and disappears would be much more easily available. They're there and they're commenting.
So the decision makers who decide, fund, and put forward these calls, what woke them up now? You. Why these calls were made this year?
We had the donors, we had the idea, and we did it.
Well, how does this idea come about? Like, what inspires it?
You live here for 15 years and you say it's time we do this. And you go out and you talk to the people in Armenian studies, especially the young people, and you realize there's a deep interest in trying to understand today. Not criticize, not applaud, not throw in the trash, not look at with rosy glasses, understand. And if that interest is there, then we owe it as institutions in the community to support that research. And at the end of the day, to support it in a way that Armenian studies does not remain a vertical silo that Armenians are interested in, but it's part of Caucasus studies, it's part of post-Soviet studies, it's part of democratization studies, it's certainly a part of what's happening today north of Iran, east of Turkey, north of the Middle East. If you recognize that and you approach it that way, it's there, it's possible.
And one last question, and I'm not going to skip this because it's become a topic on social media recently. You were the only 22 males and 1 female signatory under the Global Armenians Initiative, and this became a topic, and people retaliated, and there was an open letter with 80 people who signed after it that's saying we need more women in these positions, and 1 is not enough. I'd like to hear your side of the story. I mean,
I agree. 1 is not enough.
Yeah, 1 is not enough.
I absolutely agree.
And what do we do so that there wouldn't be only 1?
We get out there. We don't wait for invitations, and we don't make our participation conditional. We just get out there. And there are many women who are very active. Women who are active in social issues in Armenia. Diaspora women active in social issues in Armenia. Most of civil society activists in Armenia are women. So it's not that there's a lack of women. I think that the amazing thing about this letter and other petitions is that everyone tries to find themselves in it, and I think that's only a good thing. I absolutely agree that 1 is not enough.
with these petitions, I don't really understand how they work because we've been getting a lot of them recently. And like, who decides? Who gets the invitation to sign? You just basically reach out to the people you know, because the same thing happened with the open letter. They initially reach out to the people.
The open letter that the artists initiated. The Justice for Armenia letter.
Justice within Armenia was open. It was the only initiative was open. Then the others weren't. How does this work? It's just like one group, then the other group. So when we say global Armenians, when the initiative itself is not open for global Armenians to join, how do these things, what's the solution to this?
I don't think anything is not open for anybody else to join. Everything you've mentioned has left plenty of room for others to join. I think that there are two issues here. One is that petitions in societies, forget the Armenian world, petitions that then lead to other things like referenda, develop in political systems that are not responsive to public need. If the political institutions don't work, if your elected officials are not dealing with topics that are of concern to you, you find an alternative around the doorway, and that's usually a public petition, which, as you have implied with your question, is quite haphazard. Who starts it? Who signs it? It's haphazard by nature of what it is. What all of these petitions are saying in this last couple of months, all of these 2-3 different things, are saying is that our institutions, as they are maybe not responding to the urgent need of today. And so individual Armenians, wherever, are initiating alternative paths. They are, by definition, alternative, ad hoc, not institutional, which means there are no answers to your questions. Whoever starts it, starts it. Whoever signs on, signs on. But it is a great conversation starter. It's a great motivator of further action, as these have demonstrated. And perhaps this will be the catalyst for new kinds of interaction globally. I was going to say between Armenia and diaspora, but I'm not going to say that. Globally.
All right, thank you very much. And we also thank the viewers for joining us globally.